Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. 2 p.m. Eastern. I'm going to give everybody another 30 or 45 seconds to log in here, and then we'll get started. All right, everybody, come one, come all, and welcome to JMT Consulting Group's webinar today, comparing QuickBooks by Intuit with MIP Fund Accounting by Community Brands. It's been said that a buyer does 80 to 85% of their own research on the web before picking up the phone to call a professional. So we thought it might be a good idea to give you a webinar on the exact thing that you're likely Googling. Before we dive in, I want to take a moment to review a couple housekeeping and logistical items here. First, this webinar is currently set up for one-way communication, meaning audience members cannot currently be heard by the group. So should you have a question at any point along the way, please feel free to ask it in the chat box found about 2/3 the way down the GoToMeeting control panel on your screen. We might not get to the questions immediately. I tend not to look at that control panel while going through this, but they will all be answered by the end for sure. We're going to open that up for Q&A. And also, before I forget, Dan and I are going to be reaching out to you individually tomorrow or Monday. So if you're anything like me and you come up with 67 questions immediately after disconnecting from the webinar, do not fear. We'll be reaching out. So what we'd like to accomplish today in broad strokes is twofold. We want to give you a better, more complete picture as to who JMT is, what we do, and why we do it. We also want to give you a glimpse into how MIP compares to QuickBooks. So we'll be taking a look at both systems' strengths and weaknesses in an effort to answer some of your questions as you evaluate a new accounting platform for your growing nonprofit. These comparisons will focus on what we found to be the top 5 reasons we hear as to why most folks want to make a change away from QuickBooks. And then at the end, as mentioned, we're going to open it up for what I hope is a lively and spirited question and answer session. So my name is Brendan Sohan, and I'm an account manager here at JMT. I work with both our existing client base currently using Abila products, and I also work with net new clients who do not yet own MIP and who are new to JMT. My territory is the Northeast corridor of the old, good old US of A. Those states include New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, and my favorite, Maine. I also get the pleasure of working with our clients in the tropical island and US territories. I've been here for about 9 years. I love it here. I love what I do. And most of all, I love working with the JMT clients. Dan Wharton is also joining us on the webinar. He'll be taking over here in just a little bit. But Dan is relatively new to JMT. He's been around the product for about 5 years. He's been working with MIP. Previous to working with JMT, he worked directly for Abila in a very similar role, except that he focused on existing clients only back then. So now he has the opportunity to work with new clients as well. You'll notice next to Dan's title, it says ROW or ROW. That stands for Rest of the World. The bulk of that would probably be every state outside of the Northeast, but we absolutely have many international clients from Canada, Guam, Afghanistan, and even in Tanzania, I believe. I'm probably speaking for Dan here a little bit, but I think we both very much enjoy being able to work with new and existing clients. The benefit really is extended into the client in this sense, because after your implementation, you would be back working with either Dan or myself on an ongoing basis throughout the relationship. So there's no need to meet more new people, and you get to continue working with the same folks that you originally started with here at JMT. The first thing on my agenda here today is to help you to understand who JMT is. Well, JMT is an independent, vendor-agnostic firm that works only with nonprofits. That part might be worth remembering, so I'll repeat it. JMT exclusively works with nonprofits. In our 25 plus year history, we do not, have not, and will not ever have a for-profit client. As such, over those 28 years, we've gained about 2,000 clients across the entire nonprofit spectrum. And you can see those listed on the map there. Those clients encompass every nonprofit vertical from museums, human service organizations, opera houses, FQHCs, or federally qualified health centers, professional organizations, membership organizations, philanthropic funds, Native American tribes, municipalities, and everything in between. Being vendor agnostic means that JMT is not tied to one specific vendor. And because of this, we offer many different types of solutions that solve relatively small problems to major problems, and again, everything in between. As I mentioned a couple slides ago, Abilla and MIP are not the only company or product JMT represents. It just so happens that MIP is a rock-solid, super capable, powerful, and easy-to-use fund accounting platform that tends to fit the lion's share of the organizations out there, but it doesn't mean that it's the be-all, end-all. And to that extent, you'll notice some logos up on the screen right now. Those are some past and present solutions we've offered in the ER space throughout the 28 years. Being a full-service outfit here at JMT, we also represent add-on or third-party applications to help augment your MIP system to get it just perfect for your organizational needs. Some of the areas might include add-on purchasing systems to allow your team to go fully electronic with purchasing and requisitioning. We also offer timekeeping systems, expense management systems, budgeting and advanced budgeting systems, automated AP systems, and a whole lot more. I think what I'm trying to drive at here is that JMT really takes the client's needs approach from the get-go. Being agnostic and not tied to one specific vendor or solution or idea really allows us to hunker down and uncover all of the client's needs, sort through them, talk through them with you, prioritize them, and then finally architect a solution based on our findings. It prevents us from architecting a one-size-fits-all type solution, which we are not very big fans of over here at JMT. And this is really important and why I think working with a certified partner like JMT really is the best decision a nonprofit could make when evaluating a major change like an ERP migration. But hey, don't take my word for it. Here are a few New York City-based clients who have made the jump from some outdated or underperforming accounting or ERP system to something more modern and scalable through JMT. At this time, I'm going to kick it back over to Dan for a minute.
Thanks, Brendan. And thank you folks for joining this webinar. Dan Wharton here, JMT Consulting. We talked a little bit about who we are and what we do. I'm going to talk a little bit about MIP. 37 years ago, MIP was purpose-built for nonprofits, government entities, and associations. And since time has gone on, they've accumulated over 8,000 customers. And I don't have a specific count, but I know we're in at least 20 different countries. All the while, it is meant to provide a scalable solution for small to enterprise organizations. So the customers we manage tend to range anywhere between 1 million in annual revenue all the way up to 50 million. So if you're trying to get a sense of where you kind of fit in the spectrum, that's the tendency in what we see. When I say end-to-end suite of functionality, we're talking a modular-based system with over 30 different modules that cover all aspects of nonprofit accounting needs. And some examples, it's not just AP, it's not just AR, but goes well into payroll and HR, timekeeping, requisitions, and other areas. And versatility really is the #1 selling factor. What I mean by that is you can manage fiscal year ends, you can decide not to close, you can decide to run continuously, and you can have as many segments in the chart of accounts as you wish. And we'll talk about segments and how that plays a key factor and a differentiation to QuickBooks here soon. But one other thing here that really makes MIP stand apart is it really is the only vendor out there to provide really 3 different deployment options. What I mean by that is you have a choice as a customer to decide whether or not you want your software to sit on a server, sit in 2 different clouds. Cloud formats could be differentiated based on integration needs, but the bottom line is that MIP really is the only vendor to provide that power of choice. So let me hand the mic back to Brendan, where he's going to start highlighting some of the key issues that QuickBooks users are facing and why.
Okay. The QuickBooks lineup of products is impressive, very affordable, and easy to use, but they do have their limitations. Yes, I did just quote myself right there. At this point, I'd like to switch gears and start to focus on the meat and potatoes of why all you nice folks signed up for this webinar. QuickBooks is, in fact, an amazingly great, well-rounded product, if you're the right fit. Now, QuickBooks presents many solutions to smaller businesses and nonprofits, and even outfits that are just getting off the ground, like startups. But as your needs grow, as they relate to the overall organization, or even, especially in the back office function, will QuickBooks be the product that will help you manage through the growth? You've likely asked yourself this question at least once so far this year if you're joining us on this webinar today. So let's find out. Our approach, Dan and I, when putting this webinar together, was rather straightforward. We wanted to compile and discuss the top 5 reasons we hear from clients and folks looking to move away from QuickBooks as to why they wanted to migrate. What are the issues? What are the results, the workarounds, the gotchas, and where do those issues present themselves elsewhere in the system or workflow? In no particular order, mostly because Dan and I couldn't agree on an order, we'll just call this one issue number 1. QuickBooks is difficult to audit. If you don't know this as a first-hand issue yet, you might want to ask your auditor, or you might not. The biggest issue in this category cited above, to me, the most glaring one is the last one. You can delete transactions, even posted transactions, with no audit trail. Auditors hate this. It's very much a big problem. And again, QuickBooks is great to a point. It's super cost effective, but ultimately what ends up happening is that you get what you pay for. As your back office starts growing, you're going to need to be able to audit the transactions and movement. And when you get to be a couple $1 million in annual revenue, this will become an issue. So Dan, where does MIP fall with the audit trail? Is one available?
Simply put, MIP enforces important internal controls. Users can only access the information that they're authorized to see. Admins can oversee all users and security reports and the overall organization audit trail. Customers can change who is involved in the process, but the software takes care of what is involved. So yes, there is a complete audit trail inside of the application. There are varying user types that have certain privileges. It's up to you, the organization, to set those privileges, limit what they can and can't see. And of course, we can work with you to help you determine what's right and what's suitable for your organization. A bill also provides a comprehensive solution that was and will remain to be designed to suit the unique needs of the nonprofits, government entities, and association customers. Really, the SEC need not bother MIP customers as they are 100% compliant. So we check that box when it comes to GAAP compliancy. And one other key important detail here, it's absolutely impossible to delete a transaction or modify an audit trail inside of MIP. So good questions, easily addressed by MIP. Brendan, what's issue number 2?
Issue number 2 is what I wanted issue number 1 to be, but you disagreed with me, so I'll just state my case here by vocalizing it, putting it out into the universe, and then letting it go. This issue almost relies exclusively on what I said earlier, in that you get what you pay for. And yes, $200 off the shelf. QuickBooks, it does a lot, but it also has its limitations. And as nonprofit finance professionals in the audience, you are abundantly familiar with these structural needs. And if you're using QuickBooks, unfortunately, you're aware of what it will allow and what it will not allow for as it compares to your needs. So the limited chart of account structure in QuickBooks can be frustrating for a myriad of reasons. In QuickBooks, you're allowed one class code, which can ease up some of the stress a little bit, but not a lot. you're typically limited to that one class code, and this ultimately has you living a lot in Excel. Heavy Excel usage is a clear and dry telltale sign that you've outgrown QuickBooks. And Excel, I'm not knocking it here, it's a wildly, amazingly powerful tool, but it was not designed, I don't think, or intended for you to use it as a report writer or a budgeting tool. Think of how easy it is to fat finger something in an Excel document, and then the ripple effect that might have on your work, especially if you have multiple sheets and pages going on your Excel document. Think budgeting. This does not apply just to QuickBooks either. We come across plenty of folks using large-scale, six-figure, $100,000 accounting platforms, and if they're not designed for nonprofits, if it cannot do the actual fund accounting and robust reporting, you're going to be living and swimming in Excel spreadsheets. So ultimately, using spreadsheets to do critical financial reporting it's a huge problem. We see it a lot, and it's also related to our next issue. But Dan, one of the things I hear that brings people to MIP and often keeps them with MIP is its robust chart of account capabilities and its report writer. What do you have on that?
Another good question. So MIP is really the gold standard when it comes to fund accounting. And it comes standard with the ability to program dozens of different segments in a customizable chart of accounts. Segments are different categories that can be set up to track accounting information. The chart of accounts is arrayed out like in a matrix-like structure where each element can be mixed and matched with another element. Thinking about whiteboarding, multiple objects and drawing lines from those circles to each other. Well, that's what we're talking about here. And if you just want to add a new code or combination, you simply add that code to one or more of the segments. This is very different from a linear chart of accounts, especially seen in QuickBooks, where if you want to add a new code, it requires establishing a whole new coding string. Now, you mentioned some QuickBooks users are having to spend quite a bit of time outside of the system, and they're relying on tools like Excel to create and manage spreadsheets, like you said. These are used for in-depth reporting, managing budgets for various entities, and they're also being used for complex allocations, depreciation schedules, tracking grants, grant information, managing benefits, and other payroll fringe. Well, the expanded core MIP system comes with powerful reporting tools as well as functionality for users to perform all of those functions inside of the system. And so they can collaborate with others to do so. I mentioned varying license types a moment ago. Let's invite others to kind of join in the party and get involved in the budget process, get involved in the reporting process. Something to note, QuickBooks does not offer dashboarding tools, allocation management, HR record management, timekeeping, benefit management, custom forms designing, can't track encumbrances, fixed assets, or even multi-entity solutions. And I picked on QuickBooks specifically because MIP can do all of those things. And so I was roaming the internet, and I tend to rely on a website called trustradius.com, and there are a lot of customer references in there, not just for MIP, but several other software solutions. So if you ever want to get some feedback or want to see what other users are saying about their software, go to trustradius.com and take a look for yourself. I found this one quote from Vermont Legal Aid, and I thought that it spoke well to the reporting. And I quote, "Abila MIP Fund Accounting is a robust and powerful application suitable for organizations which have outgrown QuickBooks or Peachtree. It's useful for organizations or departments where multiple users need to be able to access it simultaneously." End quote. I really, again, think that's a great quote and helps paint a positive picture. So let's keep going and see what the next issue is.
Issue number 3, insufficient reporting or business intelligence tools. For example, nonprofits that are, let's say, grant funded, it's really difficult to pull off the reports in the format you need out of QuickBooks. Can it be done? Sure, but not very easily. Once in a while, maybe. Reporting across multiple fiscal years. Let's say your grantors are on a January 1st to December 31st year end, and your organization is July 1st to June 30th year end. Good luck getting one single report out of QuickBooks. You'll end up piecing together separate halves from 2 years in a spreadsheet. And what about things like revenue and expenditures by cost center, whether they be programs, locations, departments, whatever you want to call them? Again, with QuickBooks, it's got a limited chart of accounts, so you're not able to get those types of reports by the different cost centers together, concisely at least, in one report. And what about non-financial and statistical data or information? Ultimately, a nonprofit, at a nonprofit, what you're trying to say is not just how many dollars and cents do we have, though that's important, but maybe more importantly, what does that mean? What picture are we trying to paint to our funders and board? Oftentimes, this is done by accounting for non-financial information like the number of meals served, or number of children housed, or how many scholarships were awarded this year. Whatever your amazing nonprofit does, you're going to want to be able to and have the ability to have that non-financial data in there. And in QuickBooks, it is very difficult to get stuff like that accomplished. Dan, does MIP do a good job with non-financial and statistical data, or is it terrible?
Well, Brendan, I'm glad you asked. See, that's the benefit of being the organizers for this event. So let me dig into that a little bit. MIP was designed for orgs and is designed for orgs that need to track a variety of complex sources like grants and programs and services. Well, go back to what I said a little bit earlier about how the chart of accounts is arrayed out in a matrix-like structure where each element can be mixed and matched with another element. True fund accounting is all about connecting debits and credits, especially where there are dozens of different circumstances involved. Another powerful, or another way to look at this is MIP's powerful and visually impressive reporting tool that is embedded within the dashboard. And that dashboard actually supports the measurement and tracking of key performance indicators. Some of you folks have heard of KPIs, wondering how they come into play. Well, KPIs are developed right from the onset, and certainly they can be changed or modified or added, but these are all tailored to suit the needs of, well, really your specific needs. Cloud customers can have access to role-based dashboards as well as organizational dashboards. Again, these are fully customizable. Brendan, you mentioned a few things earlier. You know, how great would it be to log into your software and immediately see what answers to questions like how many scholarships did we award this year? What's our average? How does that compare to last year? Was this a change in revenue or a change in outcome? And something else we've seen from other projects that we've led, QuickBooks is relying on partners to help customers produce financial statements, and this is intentional. Well, we're a partner too, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but what is the overall cost here? How much time is that going to take? Is the partner going to help convey the right message and the right story to leadership and funders? Well, with MIP, the piece is already in place. You just need to customize and deliver. So I found another a customer quote. It's from Spring Lake Improvement District. And I quote, "We use Abilla MIP fund accounting for our general government and enterprise funds tracking information, not only by fund, but department as well. We used to use QuickBooks, and switching to Abilla enabled us to track shared expenses across funds, and the financial reporting ability has been extremely helpful in preparing year-end financial statements for our auditors." Here's the kicker. Switching from QuickBooks to Abilla Fund Accounting made it so much easier to truly do my job. I really think that's a great quote. We're promoting the idea of using reports to tell your story and not just looking at how you looking back at how you performed. Great quote. Brendan, what's next?
Well, I actually have a follow-up question. Was that quote also found on Trust Radius?
It was.
That's good, because otherwise I was not going to trust it immediately. Sign number 4, you are unable to perform nonprofit accounting tasks, such as like allocations. You're not able to perform allocations. So we hear this so often from grant-funded organizations, whether you have to negotiate an indirect cost rate with your grantor and you have to allocate, let's say, only a certain percentage of your admin for that specific grant. You have to account for and keep track of all those costs. And a task like that is fundamentally very difficult, if not impossible, within QuickBooks. So what about budgeting? How about creating budgets for different cost centers? And what about creating a budget just for one grant? What about multiple versions of budgets and contingency and other types of what-if scenarios? All that is tremendously difficult, if not impossible, to do right out of the box of a QuickBooks system, which ultimately puts us back into Excel. Required nonprofit financials, the third bullet point. You are required by the law to report certain nonprofit financial reports that you're all familiar with, those FAS 117, those compliant reports, statement of revenue and expenditures, statement of activities, and all those sorts of things. Well, QuickBooks, they have their own way of doing it, and its first issue is in the nomenclature. They refer to revenue and expenditures as P&L. So right from the get-go, these QuickBooks systems do not have a nonprofit mindset. So typically what it comes down to is that you just cannot do them in QuickBooks, which again puts us back into Excel. And Dan, since I designated you our MIP expert guy for the hour, what does MIP's budgeting and allocations look like? Is it any good? I know, you thought I'd never ask.
I know, and I'm a little leery of you calling me an expert in anything, but for now I'll take it, and I'm honored. But let's talk about budget first, because budget management is apparent within every aspect of the software. You see budget versus actual information when you first log in. Once you're in the system, novice users can jump right in and start using the canned reports to hold their program managers accountable. How awesome is that? More tenured staff, the storytellers of the group, they should really use the custom report writer that's going to help them make just about any comparison they can dream up. Budget by department, by location, by program, by period. You name it, it can do it. And speaking of program managers, MIP does, again, have a special license for those folks that you want involved in the budget process, but you don't want them touching the GL. So really, I love the budgeting functions within MIP. Allocations, we saw this earlier when we looked at how MIP was built. It's better equipped to handle accounting structures with more than just fundraising revenue. So they could be seeing revenue from many different places, and MIP enables allocations on programs, departments, grants, and across segments for complete funding audit trail. Key important note, MIP has over 150 canned reports within the system, and any one of those can be customized to include additional data. So take comfort in knowing that there's versatility, but maybe most importantly, it has your back. These tools that you're using, they're all FAS 117, GASB 34, GASB 35, GDPR, and even ACA compliant for those folks who love these acronyms. Another trust radius reference, this one comes from Eastern Area Agency on Aging. And by the way, we have no real affiliation or relationship with Trust Radius. I just happen to love the fact that our information is available and easy to see. So. And they verify.
We're simply too lazy to go to another website.
Well, I mean, I'd much rather use real world information, not fake news.
Sure.
Again, from Eastern Area Agency on Aging, and I quote: we used to utilize QuickBooks for billing in a couple of our programs. However, we were able to transition everyone in the agency off of QuickBooks entirely in the past year. There's no way for QuickBooks to provide what MIP provides, and we needed everything in one system. All right, Brendan, what's the last line we want to talk about?
No, man, I thought you'd never ask. The last issue, which rears its head the more as you grow, is the lack of technical support. The fact of the matter is that you just are not going to get much there from QuickBooks. While it undoubtedly has the largest user base in the world, interestingly enough, the partner and professional services community that works with QuickBooks tends to be rather small. So sure, you can go from forum to forum asking your peers questions about QuickBooks, but in my world, in Dan's world, that's not really considered support. So we come back to the whole thing of you get what you pay for, and for $200 worth of software, I believe it comes with 30 days of support, and that's it. So if you find you're struggling with good support on QuickBooks, that's another sign that you've outgrown the product. Again, it's not made for complex organizations or accounting functions. It's great for bookkeeping, for a small shop, for a startup. But as soon as your small nonprofit gets a little more sophisticated and more than one person in the finance team, you start getting multiple funding streams where your annual operating budget exceeds $1 million or a couple $1 million annually. Then the limitations of QuickBooks, they just become very apparent at that point. Dan, this will surprise you, but I have a question for you about issue number 5. Does MIP or JMT offer support? And you know, I feel like they would, considering the complexity of the program.
Well, this question seems a little bit staged, but I will answer it regardless. Okay. Of course, MIP offers a support plan to help those in need. And it's not just, it's certainly not a sink or swim mentality. MIP does a great job of providing tools and resources, and those tools and resources are embedded within the software. They're apparent within all of the websites that they manage, the online community that they open up, and they're extremely transparent when it comes to information on what they do and how they're running things. So great overall strategy, great overall mindset. But really, at the end of the day, our customers, they love really one thing, and it's just one word. It's JMT. And seriously, all channel partners in the MIP network are product certified professionals. Of course they are. But only JMT offers custom support to help you through really every step of the organization's evolutionary process. You think of how many different stages you could see. Initially, it would be the transition away from QuickBooks or maybe any other platform that you're using. A lot of times we see kind of that middle transition, and it's not really anything to do with the software, but it's more about the organization, because there's maybe a change at the bookkeeping or accountant level. Many times we've seen actually 2 or 3 people leave an organization in a very short window, or there could be a change in leadership. CFOs, for whatever reason, they're very, very short-lived in a lot of organizations, especially the larger organizations, 5, 10, 15, 20 million. They seem to, they seem to move. The other stage, it could be just a major organizational change. Your organization's merging with another. Your organization is changing focuses or starting to operate in multiple states. These all require a lot of careful consideration. They really need a partner to guide them through, or they need someone with domain experience to help them through it. And that's really why we're going to self-promote JMT here. That's exactly why I jumped from Abilla over to JMT a couple of years back, because we had these proven methodologies. So another Trust Radius quote. This one came from an undisclosed person, but again, a verified user, so we can at least stand on that. Quote, Abilla MIP is an ideal fund accounting solution for small to mid-sized nonprofits that have multiple funding sources. It provides a lot more functionality than QuickBooks without being ridiculously expensive. It can be tailored for a variety of users and different kinds of nonprofit entities. It is very suitable for a grant-based agency such as ours. So we don't know who that came from, but we know they are a grant-based agency.
Seems pretty trustworthy.
Right. I guess that's why they call themselves Trust Radius. So what's next? Move. Just keep swimming. I hope that's not copyrighted. Anyway, we've given you plenty of legitimate reasons why you would want to consider MIP, but we also realize that there may be some mental obstacles. What I mean by that is, are you familiar with the word FUD? Brendan, are you familiar with the word FUD? Say no.
I don't think it's a word.
Whatever. It's short for fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Another way FUD is expressed is these are the scare tactics that we've heard from naysayers, either inside the organization or outside of the organization. And what they, quote unquote, claim is that they state MIP is too cumbersome to set up and learn. Well, the truth is that if you have a partner with a proven methodology such as JMT, well, it prevents against disasters and adds value in organizations. Let the partner guide them through the process. We also offer post-implementation services to support ongoing needs. So we realize that staff is going to change. They're going to need training. We understand that situations change. You may need to add a new segment. You may need to add new lines of revenue. You may need to someone to guide you through the transparency process that many of our nonprofits are going through right now. But bottom line is it's definitely a myth. Claim. Our auditors like QuickBooks because they understand it. Well, the truth is nonprofits are under increasing pressure as FASB standards are changing, like I mentioned, and more transparency is required for the stakeholders. MIP helps your team with audit prep, and auditors appreciate the additional details that MIP is going to provide them. So, last claim that we hear quite often, QuickBooks Plus is serving you well today, and therefore the Enterprise Edition is recommended for mid-sized nonprofit organizations. Well, the truth is that once NPOs get past that 250K revenue threshold, they may be able to produce nonprofit or NPO financials better for 990s and audits, but they're making compromises in other functions. They're losing or they're still not gaining internal controls, which is going to open that up for fraud risk, especially as they add more and more staff and users. A couple minutes ago, I stated that JMT has a proven methodology for implementing new ERP solutions, and apparently methodology is a tough word to pronounce. To help us learn more about why that's so important, I'm going to turn the mic back over to Brendan. He'll help us walk us through the planning process.
It's not that hard. Methodology. Planning is key. So if you've had the pleasure or maybe displeasure of going through an implementation or migration of one accounting system to another, or maybe even an HR payroll system, you'll most likely have picked up a few tips and tricks and probably rules to live by along the way. These are a few things to consider. Picking the correct partner for your needs will most likely be a deal breaker for you. So think of it this way. Software is literally just a tool. That's it. Think of accounting software like the building materials one would use to build a house. Sure, the materials have been delivered to the job site, but you know, it's just useless if they're sitting in a pile on what's eventually going to be your front lawn. So digging a little deeper, the team that you use to build the house will be making all the difference in the world for your home and for your family. So the same rules apply when talking about ERP migration. Again, software is just a 17-digit download key. It's how efficient and comprehensive the partner is that makes the difference. We see it day in and day out. Some of you may have experience using the software publisher for implementations in the past. Seems like a solid, sound, logical decision to go with the software publisher for your implementation, right? Well, maybe not. Software companies, they tend to do one thing really, really well, and that's make great software. But they're typically not in the business of implementing that software, but they'll still do it. So what you tend to get when evaluating a software publisher for implementation is a stripped down level of service. More of the heavy lifting and heavy work gets put on your team's shoulders, and ultimately you'll get passed around from contact to contact at the software company as you complete those tasks assigned to you for your implementation. So at JMT, we very much dislike those characteristics of an implementation, hence why we're in business. And we pride ourselves on fixed fee. Yes, fixed fee, efficient, wholesome, and comprehensive implementation. So I wanted to open this up to some Q&A, and I do have some questions already. Andrea here asked, Brendan, you're so engaging and funny. Do you do stand-up comedy? I don't. Oh no, that's actually not her question.
Wait a second.
Her question, sorry. Her question is, how long does a migration take from QuickBooks to MIP?
Am
Dan,
I
you want
supposed
to
to
take that
answer
one?
that, or are you going to speak
Yeah, why don't
in,
you take that
in
one?
the third person? All right, beautiful. All right.
No, I can change my voice to yours and just answer it for you.
All right, so let's go back to the proven methodology that we mentioned a few minutes ago and a couple times. If you take a look at all the steps that are involved in our process, you start to understand that there are legitimate reasons as to why you want to follow a step-by-step process, and it's not just by the requirements of the software, but we've done this enough times to know, and our consultants have done this enough times to know that there is a methodology and a process that you have to adhere to, and it holds us both accountable. But from I'd say beginning to end, you're looking at roughly 10 to 14 weeks, but of course that answer is going to differ based on the exact situation that we're looking at. So rule of thumb is 10 to 14 weeks, but realize that there are some variables.
If you're a massive nonprofit, ideally you're not using QuickBooks, but if you are, think longer. And if you have, on the flip side, if you have an experienced tech-savvy staff who maybe some of you have gone through an implementation, you could think quicker than 10 to 14 weeks. Question number 2. Oh, good question. Dan, you had mentioned different types of users. What types of users are available for MIP?
I think 4 come to mind. You've got the full user, which is going to really allow you to perform your function as the staff accountant. You have a few different light users. One would be an executive view license, which allows you to report, pull those reports. Think of well, the name kind of gives it away, but the executive view user is really someone that could be at a leadership level, but it also could be for program and account managers who, again, just need to be involved in maybe budget versus actual process, or maybe they're piecing together reports, things like that. The third type would be a requisition only user. Again, the name gives it away, but the fourth user type would be an HR only user. So you start to think that not only there are multiple user types, but you've got to, again, remember that MIP has 30 plus different modules, and so it has license types to accommodate for those, because again, we don't want someone that's requesting or approving a requisition. We don't need them touching the GL. Same thing goes for HR and whatnot. So I can think of those 4.
Awesome. I just got more or less 2 of the same questions. Katie asks, we rely on Blackbaud for our donor database and to keep hands off the financials. That's funny. How easy is it to integrate this system with Blackbaud? And the other question that is more or less really similar is, can MIP import outsourced payroll information? Good questions.
Yeah, there are two proven ways to integrate, and I guess some might ask the question, what does the word integration mean? Well, integration is the sharing of data, and there are 2 forms in which that can come into play, for 2 different modes or means, or whatever the right word is. But the industry accepted best practice is a flat file import, also known as a definition file, and essentially it's taking a CSV file, taking a text file, combining the 2, because the CSV will have the actual data, whereas the text file will have the commands, and importing that data into MIP. And so any partner, and not just us, can help you program that. Matter of fact, if after you've done a few of these yourself, you could probably get the trick and and create your own definition files. The more favorable, but albeit a little more expensive, and could actually be a lot more expensive, best practices through application programming interface, or API. More and more companies are accepting this. They're developing on this. They realize that there is a competitive advantage for developing with APIs, because unlike the definition file process where information is just going in, and that data is not really being shared live, meaning if I do something over here on the right hand, am I going to see it instantaneously on the left hand? The answer is no, not in the definition file environment, but with an API, it is. The integration's live. So more expensive, more complex, longer to manage, but MIP is growing quickly to adopt more and more API and support more and more API integrations.
From our perspective, Dan and I, again, as mentioned, we work both with existing and net new MIP clients. I would say, in terms of the number and type of integrations that we are requested to build here at JMT, 90 to 95% of them fall in two categories. The first is, I don't know what comes in more. They might be dang close to 50-50, but one is fundraising or donor database integration, and the other one is payroll.
Yeah.
Good question, Katie. Last question. Ooh, I love this question. Are there aspects of a QuickBooks system, aside from cost, that outperform MIP? Such a good question.
I know the folks at MIP might, no, I don't think they would. I think honestly they're transparent enough to know, and they are in the process of working things through, especially in their new modern user interface. They realize that QuickBooks has probably a few key advantages. They're typically not enough to prevent a customer from making a decision as to whether or not they need to migrate away from QuickBooks, but they are, again, things that we've observed, and Abila has certainly observed, and they're developing on better solutions. But three key areas: one, invoicing; two, bank reconciliation; and three, the drill down capability. With invoicing, it's a fewer clicks involved, more information readily available, and I think that has a lot to do with the fact that they're strictly online. Bank reconciliation, again, I think that's just a byproduct of being online and having the financial backing of Intuit, and Intuit's been around since time immemorial, and they've only dealt with they've got relationships both in nonprofit as well as private, probably more in the private world, and I think that's what gives them a leg up here. The other aspect is the drill down. I think that's just a structurally design change. Now, that said, there is a specific module for drill down capability inside of MIP, and again, they are further developing their new modern user interface to combat that and take that argument away from QuickBooks.
Awesome. Good question. Good answer. I feel like this is Family Feud. Good answer. Good answer. But good answer. With that being said, that I don't have any more questions here. If anybody else has any more questions, there's another question that just came through. Would this reduce the need for visualization tech like Tableau?
Say that. Would this reduce the need for visualization tech like Tableau?
To create dashboards.
Yeah, it's ironic enough. Abila actually invested in 3 enterprise class licenses from Tableau a few years back, and I don't remember the ultimate reason as to why the relationship I wouldn't say fizzled, but it just didn't go beyond about a year and a half. The answer is yes. Now, there's a big old asterisk. I think for the users who are just starting off with business intelligence and things like dashboards, and their dashboards are quite simple in nature, and their business intelligence needs are more simple in nature, then I stand by my story and say yes. However, Tableau really does have some incredible tools within it, but in my experience, and I'll speak for some of Brendan's experience as well, we just don't see it that often where Tableau is really required in that area. The other thing too is thanks to the folks at Microsoft, they are providing nonprofits with literally billions of dollars worth of free product funding and things like that, where you can actually pick up the Microsoft BI tool and have that sync with tools like MIP. But it's not just MIP. There are quite a few other ways to sync Microsoft Power BI with their existing ERP solution. So I don't know if that
Katie
answers the question, but
yeah. So she just further went in on the question. We are looking to be able to share out information more efficiently to our donor database. We're the short answer is yes. The long answer is how much time do you have? Because there's a lot of different ways to answer that question, and there's a lot of different solutions by which we could apply to get to that. But just know that the short answer is yes. It's not an easy thing to answer concisely over a webinar, though. But we'll be reaching out to you.
Yeah, exactly. What other questions are there? Any other questions we haven't answered yet?
I'll ask a question. Dan, what are you doing next week?
Someone asked me that? That seems like a...
No, I'm kind of asking you personally. What do you have going on next week?
I think we are going to be gambling. No, wait. We'll be at a place where we can gamble, but we'll be at Shannicket in Connecticut. That is, if you're at all familiar, that is the home of Foxwoods. So we'll be at the Foxwoods Casino and Resort from May 20th to the 23rd. And this is because Foxwoods is going to hold our big annual user conference. And so each and every single year we have our customers out there. And I'm proud to say that we actually, if I'm not mistaken, we actually had more MIP users come to our conference than Abilla had their own conference last year, where it was held in
That
Florida.
makes us the largest MIP user conference in the world, by the way.
Boom. I love that. Now, I think we ought to verify that before we start. Well, I guess
Awesome.
The cat's out of the bag, so. Anyway, awesome. Yeah, that's a great, I didn't even think about that, but the first day and a half is one-on-one personalized, certified, CPE accredited training. And for, I want to say $600 for a day and a half worth of training on MIP. That's 12 solid hours for $600 plus CPE credits. That's a phenomenal value. And then the next 2.5 days, we're going to be talking about really everything else. What's going out in the market, what new and exciting tools are going to be are available, are becoming available. What's the product roadmap look like for MIP as an organization? What are they doing? And again, we're going to be for folks that want to gamble, that's great. I myself, I heard that they have a go-karting racetrack, and I know I'm going to find myself there on Sunday. How about you?
I am doing all of the things related to what you just talked about. I am required to go. But no, I'm excited. It's JMT's Innovate Conference. We put it on every year. It is for our ERP clients here at JMT, about 50 to 70% of those folks are MIP clients and users, and it's a great opportunity for folks to learn a whole ton of stuff about MIP and to network and even learn from how their peers are using MIP. So it's a great thing. We look forward to it every year. I could talk here for the next 2.5 hours, though I think my attendees will dwindle down to only the 4 staff JMT members on this webinar. So I thank everybody for hanging out with us today to compare and contrast MIP with QuickBooks. I hope you learned some stuff, and we will, Dan and I will be reaching out tomorrow or Monday, okay? And thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Brendan.
Hi, everyone.